What encouragement would you have for a husband or wife listening right now who feels like their trauma is just ruining their marriage and it's just going to just be like that forever? Like they just feel like they're stuck in it.
Hi there, you're listening to the Kingdom Sexuality podcast. We're Alana, Kyle, and Tira, friends who have a heart for intimacy and long to uncover God's truth and design for sexual freedom within marriage. If you enjoy listening to our episodes or like our content over on Instagram, would you consider leaving a review or subscribing? It really helps. Welcome here.
All right, we're back for another episode of the Kingdom Sexuality podcast. I am Kyle, joined by my co-hosts Tira and Alana, and today we have a very special guest who I'll introduce in a minute. A special welcome to all of our patrons who are listening. If you guys want to support the show, get free stuff, we had to move Hump Day stuff over there. A couple of you guys have been asking lately, where is it? It's on Patreon now because Instagram hates sex, apparently. So, patreon.com/Kingdom Sexuality if you want to join us over there. Today's verse is 1 Thessalonians 5:23. May God himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Love that. All right, quick word from our sponsors before we dive into today's episode. All right, guys, just a quick heads up. In today's conversation, we're going to be discussing topics related to sexual trauma. Some listeners may find this content difficult or triggering. Please listen with care and feel free to step away if you need to. So today we have Erin Walsh joining us. We're going to be talking about the very sensitive topic of trauma, sex, marriage, everything related to that. And then at the end, we had you guys write in some questions, and so we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. So Erin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Super excited to be here.
Yes, of course. Maybe just start off talking a little bit about yourself, your story, what you do, why we picked you to do this episode.
Yeah, so I'm a registered social worker. I'm in Saskatchewan and Ontario, so I work extensively with clients who have experienced all sorts of traumas, but specifically around sexual trauma. It's something that is near and dear to my heart, and it's quite involved in everybody's lives who we work with. One of my main goals in therapy is to really create strong families, because what we see in anybody's therapy is that when mom and dad are okay, kids are okay, and to help them become individually strong means their marriage is going to become individually strong, and then the whole family unit kind of comes together. And so to create a strong family, sex just happens to be a very big part of that between the marriage. And, you know, it's one of those things that kind of is a double-edged sword. Sex affects life, life affects sex, just kind of how that rolls. So,
and you also are a registered psychotherapist, is that right?
So depending on what province you're in. So according to Ontario, I know the legalities around all these things are quite funny. According to Ontario, I can also be called legally a psychotherapist. It's just it goes both ways with social work because it's the same schooling. In Saskatchewan, they're a little bit more picky. So here, I actually can't put that on my little name tag at the bottom of my email. So I know. So it just depends on who I'm working with, what province they're in. So it's just one of those things.
For our American listeners, we're talking about provinces right now in Canada. So if you're like, what is a Saskatchewan or an Ontario? Yes, we are all Canadian if you are new to the show. And so she's talking about provinces in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe let's just start off with the very broad definition, or question. What is trauma?
Yeah. So trauma, I was reading a book recently and they were like, we don't even have a solid definition for what trauma is. So the best way that I have been able to explain it to my clients is it is an event, multiple events, or an environment that ends up creating in ourselves a negative core belief that we end up thinking about ourselves. So it's like something has happened that we now wear a pair of glasses, and that's how we see the world and receive our experiences. So for example, let's just say I had a very threatening childhood. That could potentially lead me to start wearing glasses that everybody's threatening, and I need to be very aware of that, right? So then you live your life a little bit more in fear than anybody else because you think anybody's going to hurt you in that way.
Let's go into sticking with that theme of threatening. Talk about like what do the brain and the body do when they see threats?
Yeah, so there is a whole biological process, a bit of a domino effect that happens when we have trauma in our lives. And so trauma, just to add on, is not just the car accident, the emergency room trip, the police getting called. It can literally be the mom never said I love you when she hung up the phone. Right? So it's literally anything that can gear our nervous system to start being aware that, why didn't mom say I love you? Why has she never really said that to me? And then it kind of creates that domino effect of, am I worth saying I love you? Is she just distracted? Am I not worth her time? So the brain just kind of does this thing where it cascades into the worst case scenario in this situation, right? So when we have an actual trauma that is sitting in us, we've put on the glasses, we're now living through the world with this data in our bodies that, mom never said I love you, or I have had the car accident experience. We then begin to become really aware, and our brain starts to scan for those similar threatening events. So it's going to affect how we then go about our everyday lives. Engaging with another person, are you going to go in expecting them to one day be saying I love you back when you're talking about romantic relationships? Or are you just going to be a little bit more closed off to it, not really feeling the need to have that said to you, like you're worth having that said to you? And the biology of this is that when we have a trauma happen to us, it creates a little neuron. And we're creating hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of neurons all day long, right? And when we go to sleep at the end of the day, REM takes place, and it kind of sorts out the neurons, throws some out, places some in our working memory. And for some of those ones that are actually traumatic memories, they go and they sit in our emotional brain, which is called our limbic system. And our amygdala then takes that data and it goes, okay, anything that I associate with the trauma that has occurred today. So it could be a time, a color, a sensation, a feeling, anything that has associated with this trauma, it will start scanning for similar things. And so let's just say mom was wearing red a lot that time, right? Maybe her favorite color is red, and so she just wore red every time she didn't say I love you. Just happened to be a coincidence, right? So now anytime somebody who's trying to maybe engage with you in a cool way and they're wearing red, you probably are more likely to disengage because of the color red. You're triggered. Your body has scanned for that color red. So even if they're a safe person, even if the color red is fine, there's nothing wrong there, you're going to disengage because that color is now associated with an experience that has left you with this negative core belief going forward.
So when it comes to like sexual trauma, let's say, I can see how then if you're trying to have sex with your spouse and you've had this like trauma thing banked in your brain from a past experience, how that would hugely affect your sex life in a safe marriage going forward. Interesting.
Have you found, like, obviously you're going to have some people who have very obvious trauma that has happened, but do you also help people discover that they did have trauma that they've suppressed and then come out after, and then that's the reason why they're suffering in their marriage?
Yes. So most of the time, and I would say I've done this with pretty much every client, is they'll come in having this one big experience of trauma, right? But a lot of the times those big experiences happen a lot later in life. And it's actually our really, really young memories that start to create the foundation of how we view the world. And how we perceive things going forward, right? So a lot of the times in the beginning stages of therapy, when we're going through, we do this thing called target planning in EMDR, where we're picking out things that we want to target with the EMDR. We go in and I have to kind of do some psychoeducation around trauma and what it is for them. So they might not even realize that, oh, well, my buddy showed me porn when I was like 8 years old, but big whoop, right? Well, when we actually really go into that, we get into the body about it and we see what body has to say about it and spirit and all those things. They start to realize that, oh, that actually really made me feel super vulnerable, or it made me feel really exposed and dirty or tainted or something along those lines, right? And so then that led them into seeking out relationships in high school, or really pulling back from it is another reaction that could have happened, right? So seeing it as dangerous or something that you really shouldn't have been doing, carrying that guilt, right? The guilt and the shame. And those things don't just kind of go away. You have to actually intentionally work through them to get that memory out of the limbic system and into the working memory where it's resolved.
So you mentioned EMDR.
Yes.
Can you explain all of that for our listeners who don't know?
Yes. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And basically, the really cool thing about EMDR is that it basically takes what Jesus has already designed of how our body processes, and we manually entice it, right? So when you go to sleep at night and you enter into REM, your eyes move back and forth across your mid-center hemisphere, right? So it goes left to right, left to right. And what we do during REM is we process all of those neurons from the day. Some get thrown out, some stay where they are, they get processed to the working memory. And for those that we've experienced that are more traumatizing, they don't necessarily get processed properly. So they're either stuck and unprocessed, they get put in the emotional brain where the physical reactions and the sensational reactions are still quite large. So they don't get, kind of turned off as they do when they go to the working memory. They stay nice and big so that when they're triggered, they get big again, right? So
Wow.
EMDR is very interesting. I love what I do. So EMDR, what we do is we kind of do that process, but targeted. So we talk about a specific instance. So let's take the red shirt with mom not saying I love you instance, right? So generally somebody has had that's a recurring event. That's something that's happened probably 100 times over their lives. So we can target that without doing 100 memories, right? So we can go, okay, what's the first thing that pops into your brain when you think about mom not telling I love you? Well, I see her face and she's standing there in her red shirt and she's on the phone with me. Great, we can target that. We attach the negative core belief that it's created about yourself. We set up a positive core belief about it. We do some other measurements that help us kind of dictate how the memory's doing and how the target desensitizes. And then we eventually get into actually doing bilateral stimulation. So if anybody has ever watched Grey's Anatomy, there's an episode where they actually use the light bar where the light is going from side to side. Some therapists will do like this. I do butterfly tapping. Some have TheraTappers where you're actually holding like two buzzies in your hands. Anything to kind of stimulate the bilateral stimulation, right? So this is literally, what's the word I'm looking for? It pushes your brain into that processing mode that happens when you're in REM. And so what we do by targeting that image, we actually target the neurons that hold those memories. And what can happen is during this process, it's going to move and reconcile over to your thinking brain. And what this does is it desensitizes it. So it takes all like the emotional explosiveness away from it. And then it installs a positive core belief. So we generally, when we're doing EMDR, we will watch somebody actually get worse. So it'll come out. So it'll be like, oh, I feel like this sucks. Oh, this is really bad. I feel really horrible about myself. I feel so much shame and guilt. And then the emotional, physical release happens. So they'll either cry, they'll burp, sometimes they even fart. Shaking can happen. Any type of kind of like bellies will grumble, muscle tension will release, anything kind of like that. And then their brain will start to kind of have a more positive reconcile about it. So they'll start to go, I am worthy in the eyes of Jesus, right? Or I know that I am loved. I know that it wasn't their fault. She was probably just busy because I have 7 siblings, right? Or I know that that doesn't define who I am now and going forward. I know that I can be told I love you and actually have it sit. So they start to have this kind of upswing, and then we clear out anything else that might be attached to the body via body sensations or anything like that. And generally after that, the memory doesn't affect them anymore.
What kind of timeline are we talking about here? Like, is someone doing this once and that whole kind of arc you just talked about with like the biological, physiological response and then the positive, like, is that in the matter of like minutes, or are we talking like this is over months and months of redoing this and doing it over and over?
No. So generally this is one session, and my sessions are about 50 minutes. So generally I can do about one target per session. And it depends too, right? Because for people who have targets where they're like, this is a 10 for me, like this is bad, it can take 2 to 3 sessions in some cases, but I personally have found that quite rare. We can generally work through a target in one session. And because I do long-term therapy, we work on getting as much as we can. So we go back and we do childhood stuff, because the research shows that when we work on those childhood memories, they actually have a greater impact on older memories without even working on the older memories.
Cool.
Right? We can do it vice versa, especially if the older memories are like really in your face, big trauma memories. But generally by working on the younger memories, there's a lot of repair that happens there.
Does the effectiveness of EMDR matter if it's like a big trauma or a little trauma?
No.
And is it like, if it's a big trauma, like, let's just say like sexual assault, like rape would be the biggest one in that category, let's say. Is it one session for like that trauma versus a less significant trauma? Like, are we talking the same thing regardless of severity of trauma?
So it really depends on the person. The therapeutic work, we have to use it in unique case by case. So there's not one case conceptualization that is the same. So if we're talking about somebody who has experienced rape or multiple rapes, they probably need a lot of preparatory work before we can even get into the EMDR, because it's likely that their sense of safety is so crushed. And so we have to do a lot of what we call resourcing with them first. So we instill things in their life where they have found safety, and we can do EMDR to actually install and beef up those safety memories. So it's kind of like the opposite of what trauma, being traumatized is. I call it, people always are like, what when I say this, but it's like traumatizing you, but in a good way. But we can so like one resource that we use is called a calm place, right? So we go in and we have you come up with the safest place you can ever imagine, even if it's made up, right? So then we install that via slow bilateral stimulation, because that's really calming. So think about when people do like fetal position, that's bilateral stimulation. It's just this way, not this way, right? So it's calming for the body. Bilateral stimulation happens when we walk, when we do like workouts, like repetitive and based off of like the different, if you're doing something like this, we do it when we run, anything, moms, when you're swaying side to side. When you're rocking your baby, right? So anything that just kind of moves side to side, left to right, front, back, you're activating bilateral stimulation, which either helps you calm down or enter into kind of a bit more of a state of processing, which is why generally if you're angry and you go for a walk, you come back feeling a little bit better, right? Yeah, cool, hey?
Wow, very
so interesting.
So maybe when our kids are having tantrums, get them to do bilateral stimulation.
Yes.
Pick them up and shake them side to side.
Having them stomp out their angry feelings, so good. Yeah. I have a very active little boy, and so I'll get him to run a lap around our backyard.
We do this too.
Yeah, super helpful.
Oh yeah, big time.
So I'm just curious, if someone's going and like they're coming to you experiencing, let's say, like we said, some kind of sexual trauma, and they're in their marriage now and these things are coming up, are they coming together as a couple, or is this just like you go by yourself? Like, how does that work?
Generally by yourself. It's very rare that somebody in that case will feel their partner is safe enough. And not because their partner isn't a safe person, but remember the glasses analogy?
Right.
They're going to view anything as unsafe. So they're coming already with this preset, this foundation that I can't trust, or I'm not worthy of, or how could you even love me when I've had all of this done in my past, right? So we come in with that. So it's rare that the partner can actually be an effective support person in that case, because the glasses are just on. And that's not the partner's fault. It's not your fault. have to work with what we work with. Now, in rare cases, I have heard of therapists eventually bringing a partner in. We can do things called attachment work, where we work on the attachment relationship between people. I don't know enough about it myself, not about necessarily attachment, but doing that practical work with the partner together. Things that necessarily aren't related to sexual trauma, partners can get involved and be like a safe support person for them if they have that really, really close relationship. But generally, even just having day-to-day conflicts that normal marriages can generally withstand, somebody with sexual trauma probably isn't having a good enough tolerance to have them in session with them.
Talk a little bit about the verse that you chose for today and maybe the relationship between trauma and like spirit, soul, body, and that whole dynamic.
Yeah. So spirit, soul, body is kind of my biblical foundation for how I view all therapy, all trauma. It's our whole being, right? So we have to work with the whole being in order to effectively work through trauma. And so in the Bible, it talks about spirit, soul, body. I think depending on the translations, it kind of goes between spirit and soul. It'll kind of mix and match those. But essentially, what Paul is talking about in 1 Thessalonians is that you have a spirit. So spirit is what connects you to God. It's kind of our radio system to him, our connection. It's how we talk to God. It's how we kind of function in the spirit, right? Mm-hmm. We have our soul, which is our mind and emotions, or sorry, not our emotions, our mind, our free will, choices. That's kind of the middle player here. And then we have body, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's your body. And so then if we hop to Galatians talks about this forever struggle that we'll have until we get to heaven, obviously. But the struggle that is caught between spirit and body, right? We're always going to have that pull and contention between the two. And so what happens is body has experienced the trauma. So it's taken the hit. It's now the hormones are all out of whack because sexual trauma will, cortisol and oxytocin cannot go at the same time. Cortisol is your stress hormone. Oxytocin is that, what builds in females during sex and a little bit in males. I mean, there's a whole bunch of hormones. I won't get too much into it, but mainly oxytocin is what builds and peaks at orgasm, and then pair bonds you afterwards and kind of your oxytocin glow high after orgasm. And that makes you feel really like, oh, I love you so much. Let's like cuddle and like be together. So it's a really good feeling afterwards. So body, when it experiences that trauma, it's going to hold those neurons. It's going to remember the data that it had experiencing the trauma, and it's going to make sure that you don't experience it again. So it's going to do everything it can to protect you from doing that again. Spirit has the ability to get crushed. So generally, especially religious trauma can get really intertwined with sexual trauma just because there's a lot of, culture around, sex is bad, don't do it, like you have to be married in order, and if you're not married and you have done it, then tisk, shame on you. So people can carry a lot of that guilt and shame into their marriage just if they have a sexual history and things like that. So spirit can get really, really crushed just by that inner network of sayings, oh, you're disgusting, you're tainted, you're not good enough for this, like you're not even good enough to be married, how did that even happen, right? So we can get a lot of those narratives caught up. And then you have your mind in the middle of it who's trying to make all these choices, right? And you don't know what to listen to, right? Because you have spirit who should and who is hoping that you can have this healthy connection with somebody, right? This God-designed connection. You're hopeful of that. But then you have body, which you're like, yes, body should have this wonderful connection with another person, but it's also telling me that it's not okay. There's a problem here. So you get this inner turmoil that's just so conflicted, so confused, spirit's crushed, body's crushed. We're just not okay. And so it can get really, really confusing for somebody with sexual trauma. It can get really hard to come out of that yucky narrative that people might start developing over time because of their experiences.
What would you say would be some symptoms of trauma, like in a marriage that we're talking about and more of the sexual side of things, where somebody might not even be aware that they're carrying that and that it's bringing it in? Do you have like what kind of suggestions, like if I have a listener listening that's like, well, I don't think I have anything,
Yeah.
but that are, underlying a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, any type of depression and anxiety, they're literally kind of the poster kids for anything kind of going wrong. So if you're experiencing any type of anxiety and you notice the pattern that they kind of peak around intimacy with your spouse, then pretty likely there's that kind of direct connection there. A lot of the time, for the majority of marriages who just struggle sexually, there's kind of that hitch in your body. So it's starting to notice the symptoms of the nuances of your body, right? So your husband's kind of coming up and he wants to tickle you and you're just like, oh, you're going to want sex, right? So that in and of itself, that hitch, that can be a symptom of trauma. It can also be just a symptom of what your marriage is experiencing at that time, but it can be that symptom of trauma. In a little bit more severe cases, people can find themselves saying yes to things that they don't necessarily want to say yes to. This is really hurtful for your body because what can end up happening is you can start disassociating during sex or numbing during sex because you're like, okay, I just have to take it. How do I get through this? Right? And so your body tends to shut that off so that you can just do it and get through it. This is really, really harmful to ourselves because at the end of the day, we want to be able to feel good. We want to be able to feel safe. And at the end of the day, we're telling our bodies that we're not safe if we have to disassociate or numb out from it. Other symptoms could be panicking, having that rise of anxiety when you think about needing to engage sexually with your spouse. It can be over sexualization, right? So it can be asking your spouse to do things that they're uncomfortable with. We talk about pornography, that is ultimately a sexual trauma, right? So doing things that you might see that aren't actually appropriate for the bedroom. So if we're asking our partners to do hurtful things or degrading things or anything along those lines, because we can have that kind of hypersexualized point of view. So the range is there. It can really look like normal trauma. So it is really hard to decipher, which is why when you start therapy, we ask for patterns, right? We're looking for, okay, so what is lining up with what? Is the anxiety starting to come up when you're trying to be intimate or when you think your spouse is trying to engage in that way? Do you notice, that you can feel safe with your spouse, and does that end up affecting sex at the end of the day? So it's looking for those types of patterns within yourself and within your marriage. And even if you're not married, if you're an individual who's had sexual trauma in the past, how does it feel for yourself thinking about getting married and needing to engage in that one day? So it can be really subtle, which I know isn't like the most helpful thing in the world, but it can really show up in so many different ways.
Can EMDR help with porn addiction?
Absolutely. Huh. Yeah. So EMDR, we actually have specific addiction protocols that work with alcoholism, opioid abuse, like all the addictions, right? Of course, in like that addiction point of view, there's also like the health side of things to go through. But for something like porn addiction, absolutely. Oh, it has great results with porn addiction.
Cool.
Do you do any CBT?
So here's my 2 cents with CBT.
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Cognitive behavioral therapy. So when we look at our whole self and our whole being, I used to have a drawing of a tree that I would help explain this to clients. So when we look at diagnoses or symptoms, so diagnoses are essentially just groupings of symptoms. I don't know if anybody knows this, but the DSM was actually never supposed to be a diagnostic and statistic manual. It was just trying to describe what people were experiencing without having to list the 10,000 symptoms they might be experiencing, right? So at the top of the tree, you have all of your leaves. So this is the nail biting. This is the anxiety. This is the bipolar diagnosis, right? The avoidant attachment diagnosis, whatever it may be for you. Anything that shows up, that's your leaves. Then you have your root system. Now, your root system is your experiences, your body, what you're holding on to, right? And if our body is full of negative experiences and yucky things, it's basically like the roots of that tree are not healthy. So, of course, it's going to produce unhealthy leaves, right? If we can help with the root system, which is what EMDR tackles, there are other modalities such as somatic experiencing. IFS, which is internal family systems, is another good one. EMDR, I find, is just the easiest for clients to understand, and it packs a really, really hard punch, and it's been empirically researched, and it's just an across the board helper. When we get to those roots, which goes past cognitions, it goes into the body and allows for emotional processing to take place and physical processing to take place. We actually can uproot unhealthy roots and replace with healthy roots. It's like fertilizing. So you're weeding and fertilizing. CBT and other things. So like ACT, which is like oh goodness, I'm forgetting the abbreviation for ACT, but there's ACT, there's DBT, there's CBT. Basically, these are all cognitive level treatments. And what they do is they stay at the cognitive level. So they don't quite break past that emotional barrier or the physical barrier. They kind of help go, okay, I'm going to change this thought process, or why am I thinking like that? Okay, so I know why I'm thinking like that, so I should change why I'm thinking like that. So it really works towards kind of understanding why I'm experiencing this and to change the thought process and to accept things. Oh, acceptance and commitment therapy, there we go, is ACT. But the thing that it's missing is the emotional body processing, which is helpful to get those neurons out of the limbic system, unpack everything that it's holding on to and trying to keep you stuck in, and actually desensitizes it and actually just cuts out that root without having to really work so hard on changing that thought process. As soon as we go in and just work on that memory, you don't even have to work on changing your thought process because it's just gone.
Wow.
Right? So I was trained under this wonderful woman for about 6 years. And she's been in the field for probably 26, 27 years now. And what she saw in therapy was that CBT kept people in what we call a revolving door of therapy. So people would do their work for a few months. They would be like, oh, I'm doing so much better, leave. And then they'd come back with the same problems. And that would just keep happening. It's really good for keeping us in business. It's not though for actually wanting to achieve that deep healing and the literally breaking of chains for people. Like I don't want to see my clients ever again unless they've had another really horrible thing, or they just need to kind of process through some things in their life going on, right? I want my clients to walk out and be like, that's awesome. I'm done. I've worked on as much as I can. Let's do this. Right?
Yeah.
What would you say? A lot of the questions that we got from listeners was, how do I explain my trauma to my spouse? Or how do I, as a spouse, be that support for my wife who's been through trauma when I don't understand it?
Yeah. So this is a really, really hard thing for people, is explaining sexual trauma, because at the end of the day, like if you've had sexual experiences before the spouse you're currently with, the sad part is it is probably going to hurt their feelings. And so this is where people can get really nervous about explaining their sexual trauma to people. If your spouse is a pretty secure person, then probably not. They're probably going to be able to hear it well. But being able to explain it also is an opportunity to help create a safer atmosphere, because you're sharing, you're being vulnerable, and vulnerability is just a good thing in marriage. So being able to explain it to them, be ready for it yourself. So whether you need to talk to a friend first or talk to a professional first, the last thing we want for you is, while you're talking about your trauma, is getting overwhelmed. Your partner's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And you're having a panic attack, or you're breaking down and you can't get the words out. And so you want to be able to have the right supports in place to do that. I mean, if your sexual trauma isn't overwhelming for you, then you're probably going to be able to get through that conversation, right? But again, it depends on the safety of the marriage, because the marriage dynamic can be really helpful, but it can also be really harmful, right? So if we have a spouse who's not understanding, who is pretty logic forward and that's it, and there's no emotional empathy or depth or sympathy even, then how do we explain to that person that my past is affecting my present and I'm really hurt and broken up about this? Because you're probably just going to get an answer like, okay, I'm sorry you had that experience, right? So, and this isn't a knock on the partner, because that just means probably the partner has had their own trauma one way or another. So it really depends on the safety of the marriage. Now, if you don't have a partner who is safe in that way, bring it to them logically, right? So without bringing your own trauma into it, start with, the whole trauma explanation, right? Like, oh, this is really cool. Like, here's how, neurons actually do their thing and how they get into the brain and how they actually create. So basically everything that we kind of talked about today. A lot of time, logically driven people really like the logical side of things, right? And that's how they can connect to things. If you have a partner who's reactive themselves, not so logical, but emotionally explosive or reactive, that's something to be careful of as well, because they're probably going to have a pretty decent reaction, right? A pretty big reaction to what you're trying to share with them. But in a secure marriage where spouse, you've had hard conversations before, and it might not go perfectly, but it's okay, you can get through it, and you know that at the end of the day you're still going to like each other. So at that point, you have more room, you have a little bit more grace for kind of muffling through your words a little bit more. So just kind of that room to be more vulnerable and intimate with your spouse in that case. And then for the spouse, it's really important for you to try not to judge firsthand, remember our roots in Jesus, remember forgiveness and all of the things. And then to also validate hurts, right? So if they've been hurt in significant ways, if they've had trauma in significant ways, then we want to be able to hear that and support why are they trying to tell you? It's probably because they want to work on it, right? So the fact and give them validation and support for the fact that they're trying to work on it. So trying to be supportive, and then at the same time getting help for yourself, because it is probably going to be something that you're going to have to work through too, whether that is just with a pastor or with a friend. Verbal processing it's not like useless. It does help to be able to talk and kind of walk yourself through. And of course, whenever you're kind of walking yourself through verbally or journaling, Holy Spirit has the chance to kind of get in there and be like, hey, here's what's going on, right? We love when Holy Spirit, comes in and helps convict or guide or teach whatever he needs to do, right? So spending time with Jesus obviously is another huge one. Being in prayer together. I'm a firm believer that prayer is more intimate than sex. Prayer goes deep into spirit, which is why it's really easy for people to have sex but not to pray with each other. Right? Yeah. So praying with your spouse is something that you can do that's not necessarily, it's kind of skirting around sex a little bit while still garnering and creating safety and intimacy. So that there can then build an atmosphere that will open and make room for, sex to be engaged with. But spouses, it's tough. Like, it is genuinely really tough being the spouse of somebody who's had sexual trauma, because not only does that mean a lot of boundaries for yourself, and it takes a lot of self-control, self-discipline to walk with them through that, because somebody who's had sexual trauma who's trying to work on it you guys might just need to be having conversations about, okay, what's okay right now? Just missionary? Okay. Right? And that's hard for somebody who is like ready to go, right? Who they're just like, let's try everything. Like, let's do it all. So that can be really hard. It can be really distressing. It can be really hurtful in some ways, because a lot of the time for them, it brings the idea, well, do you not want me those ways? Like, do you not care about me in those ways? Like, what's going on here? So it can just get really messy. So I always, and maybe I'm biased because I am a therapist, that just get help. Yeah. Like, involve people in your mess, because they can help untangle it with you. And to do that in a confidential space is always really great. I mean, if you're the type of people who have really safe friends, sure. If they've some wise conversation over this, but always professional help is just the safest, easiest way to go about it. So my suggestion is to just get yourselves involved in some therapy in a team who's willing to work with you and kind of help you and your spouse, whatever two ways that looks like.
What encouragement would you have for a husband or wife listening right now who feels like their trauma is just ruining their marriage and it's just going to just be like that forever? Like they just feel like they're stuck in it.
Yeah, that's such a hard feeling. It's such a horrible place to be in. So what you are feeling is absolutely real. It is a hard place, and it is quite the devastating feeling. The emotional crashes, I mean, especially if you think about it, when we even try to engage in sex, what's happening, right? We have a legit hormonal buildup happening, right? We're getting so excited. And then all of a sudden something doesn't work, whether it's like functionally or emotionally, or it becomes overwhelming, whatever it may be. Your hormones are up here. They're going to crash. Right. And so then that's your emotional awareness and landscape for what sex is going forward, and how you view your sexual relationship is that it's just associated with this big crash and burn, right? So it's real. It's hard. It's not a fun time, but there is so much hope, because I believe that Jesus wants good sex for his marriage. Like he designed it, right? He designed us to be able to experience this level of intimacy and connection and oneness with our spouse. And so I'm a firm believer that in any marriage where both parties are willing to work on this, it's absolutely possible to get there. And, as a therapist, we also have to be aware of all the things, right? So, is there an actual like hormone problem going on that isn't trauma related that we need to be aware of? Is there like an actual medical biological thing going on that we need to look at? So what are some of the outside things that we need to make sure are actually taken care of? Yeah. And if all those, I's are dotted and T's are crossed, right? Then we can look at the actual, okay, what's going on for you emotionally? What's happening in your marriage? What's happening here? So in your past that may be affecting the present, right? So there's so much hope in all of that, because there are so many solutions to the issue, and there is so much that can be worked through. The unfortunate thing about the trauma side of things is that it's going to take time, and it's going to take effort, a lot of effort, and a lot of facing your demons, like a lot of facing the hurtful past, the things that have traumatized you, the maybe accepting some responsibility, but ridding the shame and the guilt, right? So no matter what path you're on, it's going to suck. I tell that to all my clients. Therapy sucks. It's not a good time. At the end it is, and I'm excited, and I'll hold hope for you, but it's going to be a bumpy ride. So there is so much hope. There is so much healing. And I believe that it is just, it's one of those things that God, I believe, has a desire on his heart. And if he desires it, then there has to be a way.
Amen.
Love that.
Yeah.
What if someone's listening and thinking, hey, I might have some trauma that I need to deal with? Like what should be their first step?
So, I mean, start logging habits. So not habits, your patterns. So when do you notice it coming up? How do you experience your symptoms? When do they show up? So it's starting to notice is what we like to call this. Noticing is helpful in a huge way, because it keeps the connection open and the line of communication open between your working memory and your emotional memory, or your emotional brain and your thinking brain. So when we experience a trauma and when we're triggered by the trauma, it can actually hinder the communication we have with our thinking brain, which is where all of our good resources are, like our logic, our making sense of everything, like being able to rationalize, plan, all the good things, a lot of the good resources we use to kind of work through things. When we're emotionally overwhelmed, communication there kind of gets a little rocky. And we then heighten in our emotional brain, and we're like, oh my gosh, right? So when we begin to notice what's going on for ourselves and bring awareness, it activates something called the medial prefrontal cortex. And this is like the glue, like the bridge between those two brains that keep them talking. So when we notice, which is just like, okay, I'm noticing that my partner just tried to touch me and I hitched, right? Okay, I'm noticing that. And eventually what you're going to kind of find is that your body can relax once it's just notice what's going on, especially if you have enough positive resources internally and externally. You can actually go, okay, do I need to be hitching right now? No. Okay, let's try relaxing. right? So the medial prefrontal cortex keeps those positive resources accessible, so you can actually start utilizing and implementing rather than going, oh my gosh, what do I do? Right? Because then, you cut off communication in that working brain, and you don't have access to thinking through logically what you should be doing or how you can help yourself in that moment. So start noticing those patterns, start noticing your body, become really good friends with your body and your inner self and your inner brain. I would also start, depending on, if therapy is accessible or not, getting into some books. I have some books that I was going to recommend. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but Sex, Jesus, and the Conversations the Church Forgot by Mo Isom.
Mm-hmm.
And then The Great Sex Rescue by Sheila Ray Gregoire.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for those of you who are very logical, love to understand the kind of hormones, the science, and everything behind it all, which can be really awareness bringing for people, is the Scientific American Book of Love, Sex, and the Brain by Judith Horstman. So those books are all really great. They talk about shame and guilt and kind of the Jesus side of things. They're all Christian, not the Scientific American book, although it does talk about scripture in some degrees because it goes over all forms of love and whatnot. The Mo Isom and Sheila Ray Gregoire one, they are both Jesus-centric books. They bring biblical perspective in, and they talk about the healing and that you are able to have that kind of full release from any type of sexual trauma or issues that you're experiencing in the bedroom.
So fascinating to me. Sorry. Well, I know, I'm just saying it's so fascinating to me that all this stuff is going on in your brain, and you are like, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. Like, there's so much of this is like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I don't need to know. Like, your body just does it, but it's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
For those wondering, we'll link those books in the show notes so you can access them easily. Okay, let's get to some listener questions here. So first one, how do I approach sex as a newlywed when traumatized by my spouse's sexual past?
Yeah, so it's unfortunate in the sense that, your husband has had this experience and when we become one flesh, there is that sense that you're getting brought into it, as in a marriage, you don't not really share anything anymore. You're one flesh, you're becoming all consumed by somebody else's life as well. Not all consumed, I should say, but you're pretty enmeshed at that point. Right. And so when we have somebody who's experienced a traumatic situation and we have played witness to it, we call this vicarious trauma. And so whether it was witness or just verbally hearing about it, that can be quite traumatizing in ourselves, which then now you have your own trauma. So it's really important in this case to work through it individually by yourself. So what we don't want to have happen in this case is for the trauma to start showing up with both of you, because think about, you're in the throes of it, right? He's already having a hard time, right? So he's now, whatever has happened, he's having lots of shame, lots of guilt, or is feeling like unworthy or not good enough or whatever have you, right? She's traumatized by what he has experienced. So now she's also having conflicting feelings, whatever it may be. Why didn't he care about me? Oh my gosh, that was so overwhelming for me to even hear about. That was such a horrible experience. Now, what if that happens to me? Right? So you all of a sudden have this conflicting tension in here. Sex is going to be really hard when we're doing that. Because remember, stress, cortisol, cannot flow at the same time as oxytocin. So sex is going to feel mechanical. It's going to feel not super connecting because all the connection hormones aren't engaged. It's just going to be one of those things that is really, really difficult. So depending on if your marriage is safe, I'm not sure what his trauma is, so it's kind of hard to dictate, what next steps are. But let's say he had a really bad sexual experience. Somebody assaulted him or did something he did not want. We need to get our own therapy for that. That is something that that just does require therapy, unless God is like ready and willing to do a miracle for you, then you need to go and get therapy for both of you, because you guys are just going to continue to reinforce those negative core beliefs if we continue to have negative reactions in or about the bedroom in that case scenario. And unless you two can be really gentle with each other and very understanding both towards each other, which takes a lot of self-discipline. It takes a lot of, I notice everything that's coming up for me. Take a breath. Okay. I'm so sorry you're having that experience. I'm having that experience too. Can we connect in this vulnerability? Right? Because that does, when you're gentle with each other and you're open and willing to be vulnerable with each other, that does open up the way for oxytocin to flow in. Right? But if we're both just like, this hard, this sucks, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened, it's just not going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's face it. Life is busy right now, lives are full, and these days it can be really hard to find pockets of quiet time to sit down and read the Bible. All of us want to make God's word a priority, but in reality, when it's busy, it's really easy to feel guilty for not carving out those quiet, uninterrupted moments. But what if, instead of waiting for the perfect time, you could use the everyday moments you already have to connect with God in meaningful ways, like while you're jogging on the treadmill, prepping dinner, or shuttling the kids to and from school? This is why we love the Dwell app, the audio Bible app that puts listening first. If you've been around here, you've heard us talk about the Dwell app and how it allows you to listen to the Bible as you seamlessly go about your day. This is not your normal audio Bible. The voices are calming and genuine, not robotic sounding at all. We also love all the customizable features like setting your favorite background music and your narration speed, because we like to listen on 1.5 or 1.75 sometimes. It's also worth mentioning the Dwell Daily Devotional. Each day it offers a fresh take on Scripture. It's a perfect way to start your mornings being guided through a passage of God's Word, a thoughtful reflection, and a formational prayer practice, all in just 5 or 6 minutes. There are going to be times when you can't open the Bible to read it. But now, instead of missing out, you can just listen to it as you go about your day and stay connected to God's Word. So if you're ready to listen on the go, head over to dwellbible.com/kingdom to grab your exclusive 25% off discount today. That's dwellbible.com/kingdom.
Okay, another question. How do you spice things up in the bedroom when you have trauma from a previous partner?
Okay, so are you willing to spice things up? Because that's really awesome. So if you're willing to spice things up, take it slow. Like try one thing at a time and take it slow, right? So, and have your partner be aware. So have the conversation beforehand, right? Be like, okay, I want to try this new thing. I don't know if it's going to go well though. Because then you're setting yourself up for success no matter what, because it allows you to have the room for, I don't know if it's going to work because of said stuff, but I want to try it with you because I care about our relationship. I want to have fun. Like, let's give it a go. And you're setting him up also, or her, whoever it is, that, okay, if this doesn't work, that's okay. We can pivot, right? Yeah. So we're in it. We can just put that aside and go about our usual, whatever your usual is. So it opens that up. And how cool is it if it works? Right. And then you can just kind of keep pushing the boundaries. And that in and of itself allows for greater connection. And it actually does some of that repair work. So one thing outside of EMDR that is really, really, really good for repairing traumatic memories is relationship repair. So I'll oftentimes have clients who come in and they'll have like parents who have really, really hurt them. Before we even get into EMDR, we've been doing like preparatory work. We've been doing some like mind-body stuff to get them connected to their body. We've been doing lots of things to help them get ready for EMDR. That alone in itself, for some people who already have like a decent amount of positive resources in themselves and out in the world, they might get the confidence enough to actually have conversations with their parents. And then all of a sudden, because of that conversation, mom and dad were actually able to apologize and repair and change behavior. And then we don't have to do EMDR anymore because they're like, I feel so good about this now.
Wow.
Right? Cool. So when they have a spouse who's willing to kind of engage with them in that healthy way, and who's willing to be like, oh, it's okay. Like if this doesn't work, let's just, hop back into it a different way. Or I'm going to care about you. Like we're going to figure this out. We're going to do this together and it's going to be okay no matter what happens. that can start to repair some of that trauma depending on the significance of the trauma, but it can absolutely punch a good hole in the trauma wall.
Cool.
Very cool. All right. Another question is, how to tell the difference between just being nervous and a trauma response?
So nervous, so this is a good general question for understanding normal feelings versus trauma. Normal feelings are going to gradually build, right? And generally you can do something about those feelings. So generally you can be like, okay, I know I can get through this. I know I can do it. Let me ask for reassurance from my partner. Let me, go have a bath with some candles and calm down and get myself into the mood, whatever you can do, right? So there's generally something you can do from it, and it can slowly go down. They also kind of come and go. They're a lot more flowy. You're not getting overwhelmed by it, right? Trauma tends to really quickly. So it just shows up and all of a sudden it's there and you're having a really hard time coming down from it. Like, you're going to do your deep breathing, you're going to do your candle in your bathtub, and nothing's probably going to really work. So in that case, that's kind of how you tell the difference between trauma versus a normal feeling that's just kind of showing up. And so what we do about those trauma feelings is we have to do a lot more body-centric stuff to help calm down and or reassurance and or actually just pause for the night, because depending on how significant the trauma is, it's going to take a while for your body to disengage from that memory and kind of reset a little bit. And again, remember, you're wearing those glasses all the time, right? So it's not even like you fully ever disengage from it.
Yeah.
Okay, how to tell if my sexual preferences, kinks, desires are the result of trauma or are healthy desires?
So I guess it kind of depends on what you view as healthy in sex, right? So go back to biblical principles, right? What are your personal convictions between you and Jesus? What does Jesus desire for a healthy marriage? I would say, like, if you're like, yeah, I want to have a threesome, probably not.
Yeah.
So
but
not probably not, definitely
definitely not. Definitely not. Sorry. Yes, no, definitely not. But let's just say it's just the difference between, like, do we appreciate oral, or is that something okay? Is it okay to ask my spouse to do some wacky new position? Is it okay to introduce toys or different things like that? Kinks, like, is it hurting your marriage? So, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're into feet or hands or like face, whatever it is everybody okay with it? Are you both like feeling good about it? Is it connecting for you guys? Then I wouldn't really say it's a trauma kink. It's just you're into something, right? And I don't think there has to be any shame or guilt that's carried with that, right? So I think where this person might be coming from is over sexualization from something like pornography. And this is where we just want to be mindful of, boundaries. So it's never okay to have a partner go, I want you to do this. And for the other partner to go, I don't think so. I don't think I'm okay with that. For then the other partner to go back and go, no, you have to. We're married.
Right.
That's not okay. And as soon as somebody pulls the no card, it has to be a no. Even if it's a normal, healthy thing that anybody would probably consider healthy, if the person is saying no, you actually have to respect that no. Because if that is even a no coming from a trauma response from the other person, you're just going to keep piling on the trauma when the person is saying no to a missionary, for example, normal thing, right? But if they're saying no, you can't do it. And then the hope would be that, you go to therapy, you do your healing work, you do that, and then we can gradually expand those boundaries. But the no just has to be the no. So for somebody who is experiencing that, maybe the overstepping of the boundaries or the not really wanting to adhere to the no's, that's a them problem. They have to deal with that.
Yeah. Okay, last one. Is it possible to heal from trauma without a third party, like a counselor, therapist, etc.?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that therapists do wrong is that we think we are the be all end all, and that's just not it. I am not God. I am not Jesus, and I never want to be, because that man has a terrible job. And holy, thank you for doing that for me, Jesus. Thank you. He is everybody's therapist. Oh man. So I am a huge believer that there are multiple ways for somebody to release their trauma and to heal. And I mean, that's how some people just go without therapy and actually get better, right? That has to be a thing. Like, if one day all the therapists up and walked away, does that mean there's no hope anymore? No. Yeah. Right? So Jesus is involved 100% of the time through any way, and he can absolutely totally heal, restore, break any chains that are going on in a marriage. And no matter how he does that, you can find there's other ways. So whether that's just through your own spiritual walkthrough with Jesus, like if you're somebody who has a really good relationship with Jesus and can really hash out that stuff with him, then I'm absolutely 100% positive that it is possible to do that. It's really hard. And this is where like the whole like church versus therapy stuff kind of comes into play, is that I absolutely do believe in spiritual counseling and, you know, going to pastors and everything for that. Like we need y'all. It's a really good thing. But when the person's emotional brain and the trauma is hijacking their ability to even talk to Jesus, or to accept just words from their pastor, or to allow the marital relationship to feel safe, right? If that is just a constant block, that's when I do believe that therapy is like going to be your biggest help. But of course, Jesus provides miracles. He provides total wiping of that stuff. There's inner healing work that you can do. One of the things that I really, really love is called Sozo. I don't know if you've ever heard of Sozo. So it's something out of Bethel in Redding, California. They do a whole school on it, and it's basically really, really deep inner healing and deliverance with Jesus. It's super awesome. That's another way to do things. And a lot of the time when people offer Sozo, they offer it at like pay what you can. So it's not like a therapy where it's a rigorous, like, you know, you're paying all the time. So that's a really awesome option. Don't just get it from somebody who watched a YouTube video. And I'll say that for anybody, EMDR therapists, make sure that they are officially trained, like in whatever they are doing for you. Make sure that they have extensive schooling and whatnot, because there is a lot of bad therapy. There is a lot of bad help out there. So just be very cautious of that. But yeah, absolutely. There's lots of ways.
So good.
Awesome. This has been super helpful. I am so thankful for you and your time and all of the work you do. If anyone is listening and wants to connect with you, where can they do so?
Yeah. So, I mean, if it's just for questions or anything, they can get a hold of me via email, which we can leave afterwards. Or I don't know if you want me to
show
say
notes.
it.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we can
show notes. Yeah, awesome. So you can get a hold of me via email that way. And if you are looking for counseling, I'm registered to only see people in Ontario or Saskatchewan, and obviously virtually via my Ontario clients. So that is a way. My current where I work is called Soul Soothe Counseling and Wellness. They're a wonderful Christian practice. Love everybody that I work with there. So yeah.
Awesome.
Sweet. Thank you so much. Do you mind just closing us in prayer?
Absolutely. Dear Heavenly Father, just thank you so much for this conversation. And I thank you so much for Kingdom Sexuality for helping this to not be such a taboo conversation in the Christian community, Lord. I pray for everybody who is listening, who has experienced sexual trauma, that they are left feeling with so much hope, that they can be released from that and actually experience connecting, fun sex in their marriage, Lord. I just pray for each and every one of our listeners that they just experience you in the healing processes, Lord, and just thank you for the team here at Kingdom Sexuality, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity here today.
Amen.
Amen.
Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you like our content, please like, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and tell your friends too. Thanks so much for journeying with us today as we tackled the hard questions and dive deep into godly intimacy. Make sure you follow us on Instagram to see more of our content and check the show notes for any links we might have mentioned in today's episode. We're so grateful to be on this journey with you, and we can't wait to see you in the next episode.